He stepped off the plane after 6 years abroad with money in accounts he had not yet found the words to describe to the people back home. He had made it. Really made it. The kind of made it that changes not just your circumstances but the entire trajectory of a family name. He had planned this return for months. He was going to walk through the door of the house he had sent money to build, wrap his arms around his mother, put the thing she had always deserved in front of her, and tell her that the suffering was finished. But what he found when he arrived at that address was not his mother. It was a house that belonged to someone else. And what he found 3 days later, after searching the neighborhood with a fear that grew heavier every hour, was his mother sitting outside a market in the heat with her hands open and her eyes down, asking strangers for food. The woman who had given up everything so he could have a chance was begging on the street while the person he had trusted to protect her had been living in the house he built and spending the money he sent and telling him every week that everything was fine. Stay with me. Because this story is about love and betrayal and the specific violence that is done to parents by the people who should guard them most carefully. Welcome to Bishop Tales, where every week we bring you powerful, emotional, and unforgettable stories that stay with you long after the video ends. If you are new here, please subscribe right now and turn on your notifications so you never miss a story like this one. Drop a comment and tell us where you are watching from tonight. Are you in Nigeria, Ghana, the United Kingdom, the United States, Canada, South Africa, Jamaica, or somewhere else in this world? We love knowing where our family is. Now let us begin. His name was Tobena Okafor and his story began the way so many stories begin in Nigeria, not with a decision but with a circumstance that makes a decision inevitable. He grew up in Awka in a single room that his mother had rented since before he was born, a space so narrow that when he stretched his arms fully he could almost touch both walls at the same time. The room smelled of kerosene and the particular warmth of a small space occupied by people who cannot afford to heat a larger one, and to Tobena it smelled of home, which was not an irony he had the language for as a child but which he understood fully as an adult looking back. His mother's name was Mama Ngozi. Her full name was Ngozi Okafor, but the whole neighborhood called her Mama Ngozi, the way communities name mothers, through their children, as though motherhood is the most accurate and complete description available. She was small and perpetually in motion, the kind of woman who does not know how to be still because stillness, in her experience, had always meant something was wrong. She washed clothes for people who lived in the better parts of the neighborhood. She cleaned houses, cooked for families whose circumstances required an extra pair of hands, sold groundnuts in the afternoon when the other work was done. She worked from before sunrise until after dark and she never complained, not once, not in any way that Tobena could remember, and he had been paying attention because he was the kind of child who pays attention to the people who carry things so that others do not have to. His father had left when Tobena was 4. He did not leave dramatically. He simply became increasingly absent and then completely absent, and after a certain point the absence became permanent and nobody discussed it anymore because there was nothing useful to say. Mama Ngozi had dried whatever she felt about it and converted that energy into the work of raising her son alone, which is a particular kind of work that requires a particular kind of person, and Mama Ngozi was exactly that person. She gave Tobena her food on the mornings when what she had prepared was not enough for 2 people and told him she had already eaten, which he knew was not true and ate anyway because he was a child and he was hungry and because something in him understood that refusing would take something from her that she needed to give. She kept him in school through the specific miracle of financial improvisation that parents who will not allow their children's education to end perform year after year, finding the fees from places that nobody watching from the outside could have identified. She attended every event the school produced. She sat in the back row in her best wrapper and watched her son receive awards that he received consistently because he was the kind of child who understood that education was the only door available to him and had decided very early to walk through it as far as it would take him. When he was 16 he told her he was going to make it and she said she knew. She said she had always known. He was not sure whether she believed it the way he needed her to believe it, but the way she said it made the distinction irrelevant. He finished secondary school with results that earned him a scholarship to a federal university. He studied engineering. He graduated in the top portion of his class with the particular combination of academic performance and practical understanding that makes graduates genuinely employable rather than simply qualified on paper. He worked for 2 years in Lagos in a construction and infrastructure firm, saving everything he could save, eating the cheapest food available, living in accommodation that was minimal by any standard except the standard of a man who is living for a destination rather than a location. Then the opportunity arrived. A construction company in Europe was recruiting engineers with his specific skill set and his specific experience level for infrastructure projects. The compensation was in a different category from anything available to him at home. He applied. He tested. He interviewed remotely across 3 rounds. He received an offer. He accepted it before finishing the sentence in which the offer was delivered. He called Mom Ngozi that evening, and her response, the particular mixture of pride and terror that a mother produces when her child is about to go very far away, was the thing he held onto in the first months when the distance was new and the country was strange and the comfort was not yet sufficient. Before he left, he organized what he could. He rented a better apartment for his mother in a part of Akka that he considered safer and more comfortable than the single room they had shared. He arranged for money to be sent monthly, enough to cover her rent and her food and her health care and a comfortable margin beyond those things. He arranged for the money to go to his wife, Amaka, whom he had married the year before he left, a woman he had known for 3 years and who had told him that she would take care of his mother as though she were her own, and he had believed her because 3 years of knowing a person seemed like sufficient evidence for a promise of that kind, and because he was in love, and love has always been the most reliable mechanism for the suppression of accurate risk assessment. He flew out on a Tuesday. Mama Ngozi came to the airport. She held his face in her hands the way she had held it when he was a small child and she was adjusting something before school, with the full weight of her attention and her love and her knowledge of who he was in every possible dimension. She said, "Take care of yourself." She said, "Call me." She said, "Do not forget where you came from," which did not mean what it might have sounded like to someone listening from the outside. It meant she was proud of how far he was going and she wanted him to stay connected to why he was going. He hugged her and got on the plane and looked out the window until the city disappeared. The 6 years that followed were the hardest and the most productive of his life in equal measure. The work was demanding in ways that his training had prepared him for technically but not physically or emotionally. The weather was nothing like home. The culture was nothing like home. The loneliness of being far from the people and the sounds and the smells and the rhythms that had constituted his entire world until the age of 27 was a specific and unrelenting companion that he learned to manage but never eliminated. He worked. He saved. He invested carefully, reading everything available about how to make money work instead of just working for money, applying the same discipline to financial learning that he had applied to engineering. He built a portfolio. He built contacts. He built a reputation within his company that produced promotions, and the promotions produced the resources that the promotions were supposed to produce. He called home every Sunday without fail. "How are you, Mama?" "Fine, my son, I am fine." "How is your health?" "Fine, very fine." "Are you eating well?" "Yes, the food is good." "Is everything comfortable there?" "Yes, everything is good." "Are you and Amaka getting along well?" "Yes, we are fine, she is a good woman." And Amaka, when she took the phone, was all warmth and reassurance. She said Mama was happy and healthy. She said the house was comfortable. She said, "Do not worry about anything here, everything is taken care of, focus on your work and make us proud." Every week the same conversation. Every week the same reassurance. Every week Tabena sent the money and believed the reassurance because the combination of distance and love and the human need to believe that the people you have trusted have honored your trust is more powerful than most other forces available. He did not know. He did not know that Amaka had moved Mama Ngozi out of the apartment within 8 months of his departure. He did not know that the reason given to Mama Ngozi was that the apartment was needed for other purposes and that she would be better off at her sister's place, which was a lie assembled from whole cloth because Amaka had no interest in housing a mother-in-law who complicated her daily life and her social arrangements and who represented a claim on resources that Amaka had begun thinking of as primarily her own. He did not know that the monthly money he sent was spent on Amaka's wardrobe and her social calendar and the redecoration of the apartment she had moved into with the specific ambition of someone who has decided that a husband working abroad is a resource to be maximized rather than a partner to be maintained faithfully. He did not know that when Mama Ngozi, turned out of the apartment and given no alternative, had gone to ask Amaka for help, Amaka had told her that Tabena was aware of the arrangement and that he had agreed that she should find her own way since there was not enough money for everything. He did not know that Mama Ngozi, who had spent her life protecting her son from the weight of her own difficulties, had chosen not to tell him because she did not want to be the source of trouble in his marriage from so far away. He did not know that his mother had eventually exhausted every small alternative available to her, the relatives who could house her for a month and then could not, the church members who gave what they could for a time, and had ended up in the specific destitution that arrives when a person has used everything available to them and has nothing left to use. He did not know any of this because Amaka answered the phone every Sunday with the same warmth and the same assurance, and Mama Ngozi, when she occasionally had access to a phone, said she was fine because she was Mama Ngozi, and that was what she said. He came home on a Wednesday afternoon in March. He had not told anyone the exact date because he wanted it to be a surprise, the specific arrival surprise of a man who has imagined the moment of homecoming so many times across 6 years that the imagining has become its own form of sustenance, and he wanted the reality of it to be unmanaged and genuine. He arrived at the airport and felt the air of home on his face and felt something loosen in his chest that he had not realized was held tight. He got into a taxi and gave the driver the address of the apartment he had been sending money to build in the better neighborhood, the address Amaka had given him 18 months ago as the address of their new home, the upgrade she had said he would love when he arrived. The apartment was real. It was in a good building in a good neighborhood. It was comfortable and well furnished in ways that suggested the person living in it had not been going without. He knocked. A woman answered who was not Amaka. He stood at the door confused, asked for his wife, received a look that he interpreted as confusion but which was something more specific than confusion. He went to the neighbors. He made calls. Amaka's phone rang twice and went to voicemail and then stopped ringing at all. He went back to the old neighborhood. He knocked on the door of the apartment he had originally rented for his mother. New tenants. He went to the church his mother attended. Someone there gave him a number for a cousin. He called. The cousin was surprised to hear from him, and the surprise had a quality to it that told him the cousin was also uncomfortable, and the combination of surprised and uncomfortable told him the information he was about to receive was going to be serious. He found his mother on the third day. She was outside the market. Not inside it, not doing the selling she had done for decades, outside it, on the ground, in the heat, with her wrapper drawn around her and her hands open. She was thin in a way that meant this had been going on for a long time. She was asking people as they passed whether they could spare anything, whether they had any food. Some people passed without slowing. Some dropped something in her hand. She said thank you with the dignity of a woman who has not allowed her circumstances to take her dignity along with everything else, and the dignity of it, the way she maintained it under conditions designed to remove it, was the thing that broke to Benna when he came around the corner of the stall and saw her before she saw him. He stopped walking. His body stopped before his mind told it to stop. He stood and he looked at the woman who had given him her food on mornings when she had nothing and told him she had already eaten. The woman who had sat in the back row of every school event in her best wrapper. The woman who had held his face in her hands at the airport and told him not to forget where he came from. The woman who had been his entire foundation, the entire infrastructure of everything he had been able to build, reduced to this. Sitting on the ground outside a market asking strangers for something to eat. While the money he had sent every month for 6 years had gone into another person's wardrobe. He crossed the distance between them. He knelt on the ground in front of her. She looked up. For a moment she stared at him the way people stare at things they have been wanting so long that when the thing appears they cannot trust the appearance. Then she said his name the way only a mother says a name, with everything the name means to the person who gave it, and he put his arms around her and held her and felt how light she had become and wept in the specific way of a man who has been strong for 6 years and has just found out what the strength was hiding. Now friends, I need to stop here for just a moment. Because if you are watching this and something in your chest has tightened, you are exactly where Bishop Tales wants you to be. Please like this video right now and drop a comment. Tell us, have you ever trusted someone with a parent and found that trust betrayed? Tell us in the comments below because your story matters. And if you have not subscribed yet, please do it right now because this story has a long way still to go and where it goes from here will surprise you. He took her to the best hotel in Awka that night. Not because a hotel was what she needed but because it was the fastest way to get her into a clean bed with food and medical attention in a space where nothing was uncertain. She protested. She said it was too much. He said there was no such thing as too much, which was not a philosophical position but a factual one given what she had been through. She ate slowly and carefully in the way of people whose bodies have learned to be cautious with abundance after scarcity. He watched her eat and counted the months she had been living like this based on what the cousin had told him and what the neighbors had told him and what the shape of her told him, and the counting produced a number that made him press his hands flat on the table to keep them from shaking. He ordered the hotel doctor. The doctor came that evening and took a long time and gave a list of things that needed addressing, all addressable, none catastrophic, but the list was the list of someone who had been without proper nutrition and proper shelter and proper medical care for a sustained period. Every item on the list was an indictment, and Tabena received each one like the indictment it was. He did not sleep that night. He sat in the chair beside his mother's bed while she slept, and he thought about 6 years of Sunday phone calls and 6 years of how is everything and everything is fine and 6 years of money sent in the complete confidence that it was going where he intended it to go. He thought about Amaka's voice on those calls, the warmth of it, the consistency of it, the way it had never once given him a reason to doubt what it was telling him. He thought about what it had taken to produce that consistency, the sustained and deliberate lying that had required, the daily maintenance of a false version of reality over 6 years, and the thinking of it produced something in him that was colder and quieter than anger, which is what arrives when anger has been fully processed, and what is left is the clean and permanent understanding of who a person is. The next morning he called a lawyer. He had made enough money in 6 years to know the difference between a lawyer who handles things and a lawyer who resolves them, and he called the second kind. He told his lawyer what had happened, and the lawyer told him what was possible. He asked about the apartment that was in his name. He asked about the money that had been fraudulently redirected. He asked about everything that was legally recoverable. The lawyer said most of it was recoverable with the right documentation and the right filing speed, and that Tabena should act before Amaka did anything to further complicate the picture. He also went to the police. He did not go with anger. He went with documentation. He had records of every transfer he had made across 6 years. He had the agency records showing when the original apartment arrangement had been established. He had testimony from the cousin and the neighbors and the church members who had watched Mama Ngozi's situation deteriorate while the person who was supposed to be caring for her lived in comfort. He laid it all on the desk of the officer who received him and said he was not there to create a scene. He was there because fraud had been committed and a vulnerable elderly woman had been left destitute as a direct result of that fraud, and he wanted the relevant processes to proceed. Amaka was found staying with a friend in a different part of the city. The friend's address had not been difficult to locate because 6 years of sending money had also produced 6 years of financial records, and financial records, when someone qualified looks at them, reveal patterns that people who have not thought carefully about documentation do not anticipate. She was served with legal papers on a Thursday morning, and the expression she wore when she received them, according to the officer who served them, was the expression of someone who has known this was coming and has been running from the knowing. Tabena did not go to see her. He sent his lawyer. He had nothing to say to Amaka that was worth saying directly. He had spent a long time in the years that followed the discovery trying to understand how a person commits to 6 years of sustained deception about something as fundamental as the welfare of a parent, and he never arrived at a satisfying answer, which told him the answer was not rational and therefore could not be resolved by understanding it. It could only be addressed by its consequences. Meanwhile he was building the other thing in parallel. The thing that was not about consequence but about restoration. He moved his mother out of the hotel within the week, not because the hotel was not sufficient but because hotels are not homes, and what Mama Ngozi needed was a home. He bought a house. He did this with the directness of a man who has been planning something for 6 years and whose plans have simply been redirected rather than abandoned. He had imagined buying a house for his mother since the first month he arrived abroad and watched money begin to accumulate in a way that was different from anything that had been available to him before. He had imagined it through every promotion and every investment return and every Sunday phone call. He had not imagined it under these circumstances, but the imagining was not wasted. He knew exactly what he wanted to give her, and now he gave it. The house was in a part of Awka that Mama Ngozi had always considered beyond her geography, not in the aspirational way of wanting something she knew she could not have, but in the simple factual way of someone who had never had reason to spend time in places designated for a different income bracket. It was not a mansion. It was a proper house, 3 bedrooms, a real kitchen, a sitting room with enough space to breathe in, a garden in the back where the light came through in the morning in a way that would make things grow. He furnished it himself, not by hiring someone to furnish it but by going to the shops with his mother and asking her what she wanted, which was an unfamiliar experience for her because she was not accustomed to being asked what she wanted in contexts where the question had no ceiling. She kept saying that something was too much. He kept saying it was not. She pointed at a sofa and said it was too big. He said the sitting room was large enough and that she deserved a sofa you could sit on without calculating whether sitting on it was practical. She laughed. The laugh was the first time since he had found her outside the market that her face had produced the specific unguarded expression he associated with her in his memory, the one that was fully her and not managed for the sake of whoever was watching. He stood in the furniture shop and watched his mother laugh and felt something settle in him that was not resolution exactly but was closer to it than anything had been since the Wednesday afternoon in March when he had arrived at an address that told him the 6 years had gone wrong in ways he had not been paying attention to. He hired 2 people to help with the house, a woman who came in 3 times a week and a young man who looked after the garden and handled the heavier things that Mama Ngozi could not manage. He did not tell her about these arrangements until they were in place because if he had told her first she would have said it was not necessary, which would have been simultaneously true and completely beside the point. He set up accounts for her that were in her name alone, that she had direct access to, that required no one else's intervention to use. He showed her how to access them and how to check the balance and how to transfer if she needed to, which she said she would never need to because she would not be spending money on anything extravagant. He said that was her choice to make and that the money was there either way. He sat with her on the veranda of the new house on the first evening, the 2 of them with cups of tea, watching the light change over the garden. She said she did not know what she had done to deserve all this. He said she had raised him. She said raising a child was not something you did for reward. He said no, he agreed, it was not, and that was exactly why she deserved everything he was in a position to give her, because she had given her whole life to him without keeping a ledger, without tracking what she was owed, without ever once making him feel like a debt. He said the only thing he had ever wanted to do was give her the peace that she had given him. She had made it possible for him to become someone who could provide that peace. This was not repayment. This was the natural conclusion of a life she had built for both of them. She was quiet for a while. Then she said she wanted to ask him something. He said of course. She said she wanted to know how he was. Not about the business, not about the money, about him. Whether he was all right inside. Whether the 6 years and the discovery and all of it had left him somewhere he could come back from. He looked at her. He said he thought so. He said the hardest part was not what had been done but the realization of how long it had been going on while he was unaware, the specific blindness of trust misplaced across a period of years, the gap between what he had believed was happening and what was actually happening. She said that was the thing about trust. She said you give it because there is no other way to go far from the people you love and continue loving them from a distance. You give it and you accept the risk because the alternative is to never go anywhere and never build anything, and she had not raised him to never go anywhere. She said she was not angry at him for trusting. She was not angry at him for anything. He said he was angry at himself for not finding a way to verify. She said you cannot verify love from across an ocean. You either trust or you do not. He had trusted and it had been betrayed, and that was not a failure of his judgment. It was a failure of someone else's character, and those were not the same thing. He held on to that distinction. He carried it with him through the legal process that followed, which was long and at times tedious and at times infuriating, but which moved in the direction he had intended it to move, toward accountability and toward the recovery of what was recoverable. The apartment came back to him. A significant portion of the diverted funds was recoverable from accounts Amaka had been less careful about than she had imagined. The divorce was processed and finalized with the particular absence of ceremony that proceedings involving demonstrated fraud tend to produce. Amaka had a lawyer who attempted several arguments that the lawyer herself did not seem to believe were strong. The judge was not persuaded by any of them. Tabena did not attend the hearings more than he was required to. He had more important things to do with his time. He had a company to build. He had spent 6 years learning how infrastructure investment worked, how projects were scoped and financed and delivered, how the gap between available capital and necessary construction produced opportunities for people who understood both sides of that gap. He had come home with a plan that predated the discovery of what had happened to his mother, a plan to build something in Nigeria that would employ people and create value and demonstrate that the skills he had developed abroad were not only exportable from Nigeria but importable back into it. The discovery had not changed the plan. It had made him more determined about it, in the specific way that injustice focuses a person who has decided not to let injustice be the last word. He registered his company. He hired his first employees. He secured a contract. The contract led to a second contract. The second led to 3 more. The work was real and demanding and good in the way that work is good when it produces something tangible at the end of it, when you can stand in front of what your effort has produced and see its shape and its function. He was building in the most literal sense and also in the other senses that matter, building a reputation and a team and a body of work that was beginning to be noticed by the people in the industry who noticed things worth noticing. He brought his mother to the site once. She stood in a hard hat that was too large for her head and looked at the frame of a structure that was going to be a community health facility, and she said nothing for a long time. Then she said, "You built this from the ground." He said they were still building it. She said she knew. She said she meant the whole thing. Not just this building. Everything. He said she had built it with him. She said she had done very little. He said she had done the only thing that made all the rest possible. The legal process concluded over a period of 14 months. The accounting was thorough and the conclusions were clear. Amaka had diverted a sum that, when calculated across 6 years with the consistent transfers he had made, was substantial. The court ordered recovery of everything that could be recovered. Not all of it was. The money that had been spent was spent. But the accountability was real and the record was real, and the record mattered to Tabena more than the money, though the money was also not irrelevant. He did not follow what happened to Amaka after the proceedings concluded. He heard things through the network of people who hear things in cities where everyone knows someone who knows everyone, but he did not seek the information out, and when it reached him he did not hold it long. He had decided some time ago that bitterness about what she had done was a tax on his own life that he was not prepared to keep paying. The anger had been real and he had allowed it to be real, and then he had put it down. What he kept instead was the lesson, the specific and permanently available reminder that distance creates vulnerability, and that vulnerability requires not just trust but verification, and that the people you love most deserve the kind of active attention that cannot be fully administered through phone calls and wire transfers. He hired a property manager for his mother's house. He called her every day, not every Sunday, every day, even when the call was 3 minutes long and consisted mostly of her telling him she was fine and asking whether he had eaten. He came home in person every 2 months. He sat with her on the veranda with tea and watched the garden she had planted in the back, the vegetables she had started cultivating because, as she explained, she had always known how to make things grow and she had not lost that knowledge. She brought him tomatoes she had grown herself and said, "Here, take these home," which he did, and which he ate, and which tasted the way things taste when they come from somewhere that matters. On an evening about 2 years after he had found her outside the market, they were sitting in the garden after dinner and she said something that he had been waiting for without knowing he had been waiting for it. She said she was happy. Not that things were good or that she was comfortable or that she was grateful. She said she was happy, which is a different and more specific claim, and she said it with the quiet certainty of someone reporting a fact they have verified rather than a feeling they are trying to produce. He looked at her in the evening light in the garden of the house he had bought for her and felt the full weight of that sentence and what it had taken from both of them to arrive at a moment where she could say it and mean it. He said he was glad. He said it was the only thing that had ever mattered. All the years abroad, all the promotions, all the investment accounts, all the company contracts, all the legal proceedings, all the recovery and the rebuilding. Every bit of it had been pointed at this. At this woman in this garden saying those 3 words in that tone. He said he loved her. She said she knew. She said she had always known. She said love like that, the kind that comes from a child who watched his mother give everything and decided the only honorable response was to give everything back, that kind was not something you had to be told. You felt it. You had always felt it. Even on the ground outside the market when she had not known when he was coming home, she had felt it, which was the thing that had kept her from giving up, the specific certainty that her son would come, that he would find her, that this was not how the story ended. She had been right. He had come. He had found her. And this, the garden and the tea and the evening light and the tomatoes growing in straight rows along the back wall and 2 people sitting quietly in the knowledge that they had found their way back to each other through everything that had tried to separate them, this was exactly how the story was supposed to end. If this story reached you tonight, please share it with someone who needs to hear it right now. Like this video and subscribe to Bishop Tales for powerful emotional stories every single week. Drop a comment and tell us where you are watching from, and tell us this. Is there someone you need to call tonight? A parent, a person who gave everything for you, someone you have not checked on in too long? This is your sign. Call them. We will see you in the next story. Thank you for watching Bishop Tales.